Okay, guys, so I just had the weirdest, like, mind blank because I've kind of forgot how genetics really worked since like high school. And then I was thinking in terms of like computer programming. So I was wondering, like, why does inbreeding have a problem? Because isn't it still 50% chance of any gene being from either the mom or the dad, like the original mom and the original dad? So how does that work? And I realized in computer programming, yeah, you could make something like that where you have like two cars and you're selecting, averaging or picking between their different parameters. But the way genetics actually work in like humans, for example, is you have to pay attention to what the definition of like gene actually is, like the word, like what does that actually mean? Because you could think of DNA as just data, but then you don't want to forget that it's actually been shown that we essentially have two copies, like me by myself without anyone else. We're not talking about parents or anything, just me by myself. I have two copies of something that's interpreted for the same purpose. So, like a specific gene, right? But they're different. Like one of them was basically selected from my mother and one from my father, but I have two of them. And my mother had two, but when she copied them, only one of those two got copied over. So then that's how like the recessive and dominant situation works. So basically, my body's not just interpreting one piece of data for a specific purpose. It's actually taking two pieces of data that is already sort of predisposed to be interpreted for that purpose, and it looks at both of them at once. So like for the eye color, for example, like it's looking at both of these things that are essentially the same, that could be they could be the same thing or they could not, and that's the where the problem comes in. So if you have like, so blue eyes, for example, is recessive, meaning there's a specific segment, like there's a specific spot that I could call a slot, right? But I have two slots that it's looking at. My body's looking at two slots, not one. And it'll look at both of them, and if one of them is a dominant one, then it changes what happens, and it has to both be recessive for me to have blue eyes, right? So what they're saying is like one way for you to have these inbreeding diseases is that you have particular genes that are weak, but it's not a big deal because when you have a mate, they tend to have something like that. When combined with it, the weakness doesn't really show up. But if you have, say, two children, some of there's a certain percentage of your weak genes that are copied in both, say, your son and your daughter, right? Now, when they have a child together for inbreeding, um, if then that means that since the way it works is it's selecting one of the two, then that same um, so it's for the same slot, but since there's two positions for the slot, that means that same gene that's like a recessive or a weak gene could, some of them are going to be the same, are going to be in the son and the daughter. And then since there's so many that are being combined, a certain percentage of those are now going to get combined with the same gene. So basically it's what otherwise wouldn't have happened will now happen, where you're going to have like the two recessive, like the same gene that only was on one side from one original parent is now going to be on both sides of this grandchild. It's the body's going to be interpreting the data with the same one out of four. So you have the original father, like the grandmother and the grandfather, right? With two of that, and then two, right? And then one of each gets copied over. But now, so there's four originally. So say one out of those four is considered weak. And as long as it's paired in somebody's body, then it's not expressing itself as weak. It's just there. But now you have the potential of having a child where they literally have both of the sides, both of the slots, I should say both of the positions for the same slot. There's too many terms you could come up with for this. But out of those four, they could have that one weak one represented in both. Well, they basically will. Statistically, they'll have like a certain percentage of them, like maybe 25% of these genes will just be the same gene that appears twice. And then apparently that's where the human body gets confused more. It's not able to deal with it as well, especially if it's like considered a weak gene or something that tends to be okay when it's mixed with something else that's different. But if it's just mixed with another copy of its exact self being there, then the body doesn't have the information. So then you have like these major health issues. And I just thought it was crazy that I forgot how genetics worked because my mind has been so much into thinking about computer programming because I never thought about programming a computer to combine two pieces of data that are essentially meant to be interpreted for the same purpose and combine them together to figure out what to do. I don't even know if programmers do that because from what I've ever heard or read or learned about genetic algorithms, I don't think they necessarily do it that way. I think they just do it the simple way of just selecting randomly from the two parents in a single piece of data, like a single segment of data, where you interpret a certain part of the data, a certain parameter or whatever it is, color or top speed of a car or something like that. Like you interpret it one way and that's it. You don't have two like copies of the data that you're supposed to combine somehow, which is different. And it's just weird that I didn't realize that. Like I didn't think of that, but like I had to come to that. I had to figure it out just because I was confused because I was just like, I don't know. But it's kind of cool that I figured that out. And ChatGPT actually helped me a little bit. That was cool.